Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for what will be an interesting conversation on how to use social data to make smarter marketing decisions. My name is Jason Kapler. I'm a marketing director at Network Insights. And before I hand things over to our speakers, I want to remind you about two important things. First is we encourage your questions and comments, so please submit them using the dialog box that's on the right side of the screen. And second is to let you know that we're going to distribute materials after the webinar. So you'll be receiving an email with the slides. And so sit back and enjoy the conversation. And if you want to participate, please feel free to do so. Elizabeth is the Social and Emerging Media Analyst at Forrester Research, and Paul is the Chief Marketing Officer at Network Insights. Welcome to you both. And with that, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth to get us started.
Wonderful, and good day, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about what Jason mentioned, which is how can we use social data to make smarter media decisions. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Real quick, at a high level, what we're going to be covering off on in the next 45 minutes or so is taking a look at this new era of television, and then how this new era of television has been really generated by this shift in consumer behavior. And then how are brands and networks both testing on the second screen. And then from this new era of television and this shift in consumer behavior and this testing, which new TV metrics have emerged? And then how can we actually use this data to make our buys more effective? And this is really timely because we're about to head into the upfronts here soon. And then after I'm finished sharing some data and some insights from our end, I'm going to hand it off to Paul, and he's going to show you exactly how this can be done through some really illustrative case studies. So social media is really changing the way that we watch TV. It's really changing the way audiences are engaging with TV. So the way that we watch TV is fundamentally changing. So welcome to this new era of television. I mean, it's a very exciting time, and it's really being led by two generations, Generation X and Generation Y, and we'll take some look at some metrics around that. But we know that audiences are increasingly multitasking on digital devices while they watch TV. And while they're multitasking, we know that they're sharing what they're watching with their friends. And so there's these new platforms that have emerged to enable television networks to really grow these audiences and help to build brand equity and establish this loyalty across platforms. And we saw at the end of the upfronts last year in 2011 that media sellers were really beginning to view social media as a part of the television advertising equation. And I can tell you after some recent events in the beginning of this year around social television, I can assure you that it's not going to be beginning to view, but it's going to be much more relevant and first in their minds coming into the upfronts. So let's take a look at exactly how this is happening. Well, first of all, technology is really powering this new era. Second screen devices, so devices such as your smartphone or a tablet or even the PC in your household, I mean, these are now ubiquitous in homes. So by 2016, Forrester projects that over 112.5 million U.S. adults will own a tablet, and that's going to be about 34% of the U.S. population. I mean, it's incredible considering how recently this tablet has been introduced to this market. Next, 93% of U.S. online adults own a mobile phone. I don't think that is going to be too surprising to anybody, considering that it seems like everybody today, down to maybe a 6-year-old even, has a mobile phone, but 93%, that's pretty incredible. And then lastly, in 2011, we actually forecasted that 82.4% of households will have a PC by 2012. So you can see here that these second screen devices have such a large footprint inside of the U.S. households. So technology is powering the era, but consumer behavior has also shifted. So if you think about it, TV has always been social. So, I mean, for decades we've hosted parties for season finales or the Super Bowl or the Oscars, or we've showed up to work the next day and we've talked to, you know, folks around the water cooler about that episode last night and can you believe what happened? And so, you know, this behavior has always been there, but it's shifted online, and that's really because of Facebook and Twitter and these check-in apps that have emerged to kind of enable this shift. So moving these offline conversations online. And so then next, 70% of U.S. online adults go online while they watch TV. So this is, again, talking to that multitasking behavior. 70% are doing something, going online on some of these second screen devices while they're watching television. And then 84% of tablet owners use their tablets while they watch TV. And I just did some recent research, and we find that tablets in the household are most often used in the bedroom and on the couch. So very interesting here, 84% tablet owners are using their tablets while they watch television. So a real shift in consumer behavior. So looking specifically at Gen X and Gen Y, and these numbers are increasing year over year, you know, do you go online at the same time you're watching television? And you can see here 74% of ages 18 to 29, yes, they are going online while they're watching television. You know, to follow that, ages 30 to 43, so the Gen X era, you know, 63% of them. So very, very, you know, less and less people are watching television without multitasking or being distracted on another device. So that being said, young consumers are really watching TV distraction-free. So we've specifically asked them, well, what are you doing, you know, while you're watching television? So you can see here that they're searching for information about the shows that they're watching. Some actually talk about topics not related to what they saw on TV, but then could be influenced by a friend that they're talking to, maybe about what they're viewing, which is very interesting to consider. So how are these conversations affecting the social graph? Talking about others about the show that I'm watching, or reading posts on message boards or blogs and forums about this show that I'm watching. So we know that they're on these devices, but then we also know that they're increasingly looking for content associated with what they're watching on the first screen. So U.S. adults, you know, really use the second screen to watch TV, to look up things that they actually see in ads. They use social networks to talk about the shows that they're watching on television. So things like, you know, Facebook and Twitter, which is how this kind of shift began. But we'll take a look at how there's some increasingly new social networking sites. They also like to use check-in apps like GetGlue and Miso. They email and chat with their friends and family. They browse the internet. They actually play games, and then they can also look up information about the show, the music or an artist in the show, and this is very popular for programming such as American Idol or X Factor, or The Voice, where you have talent actually, you know, singing in the shows, and their music is being uploaded to iTunes. So we're seeing that increasingly rising, considering the programming that's being developed around that type of behavior. What's really interesting when we take a step back, and I, you know, mentioned this up front on the call, is that really this happened organically. So again, this idea that, you know, television has always been social, and that everything here has really evolved organically. And, you know, again, viewers and fans just second nature turn to Facebook and Twitter to talk about their programming. You know, anything from, you know, their status update to posting a link to sharing a video. I mean, this all just started happening once Facebook and Twitter exploded onto the scene. And what happened was that television networks really took notice to this, just these these conversations that were happening without any of their own promotion or their own marketing, just these organic conversations that were taking place around their programming. And what they did was they started to develop Facebook fan pages for specific shows and even for specific characters. They started developing Twitter strategies to help join in the conversation in a meaningful way. But then they got really smart about it, and over the last year or so, we started to see, well, networks are spending all of this time pushing out this content onto these social media channels. Some of them are actually now aggregating these social activities on their own properties. So some of the examples of folks doing this are, USA, WWE, Fox, for instance, and we'll take a closer look at that. And so as social television has organically evolved, so has the need for brands and marketers to have better analytics, to be able to measure this, to make sure this is actionable. And so let's take a closer look at the examples of how these networks and advertisers have been very quick to innovate. So I know that this is a very busy slide, so we're going to start on the very left here with display ads. So brands can actually run display ads in check-in apps like the Get Glues and the Misos. They can run display ads in co-viewing apps. So we'll look at those more closely, but co-viewing apps are being developed by networks and by brands specifically around their programming, and there's display advertising within those. And then on actual network websites and communities, you can see here below that Lincoln had a very large sponsorship with one of USA's programming, and they ran display ads here, which is just a small screenshot of their online community. And so what's interesting is that there's really a common best practice when it comes to this medium, and that's that you're making sure that you're running ads that are relevant to this content. So for example, Gap actually ran some display ads that were a part of a sponsorship that they did with Entertainment Weekly last fall in the Get Glue app. And what they did was they aligned their fall fashion promotion with Entertainment Weekly's must-see fall TV. So Entertainment Weekly came out and they said, here are the top shows you have to watch this fall, and when you check in, you can get 40% off, with Gap on any of their fall fashion. So running display advertising that was very aligned around the content and the promotion that they were trying to get, fall programming, fall fashion. Next, social media. So these social networks are continuing to have a really high level of organic activity. Networks and brands have become a lot where we see brands excelling and really making a footprint when it comes to social TV is extending very large sponsorships that they have onto the second screen. So for instance, Top Chef has a long-standing relationship with Toyota for their programming. Toyota has sponsorships that involved the chefs driving their cars, specific quick-fire challenges, promoted content on their Facebook page, and so they really were able to be ingrained in everything having to do to Top Chef, everywhere from their website to their Twitter to the Facebook, and so they were able to extend their sponsorship onto the second screen. And then Pepsi did a really interesting thing with the X Factor. They actually created their own online website that aggregated all the chatter around the X Factor onto an owned web property that was hosted by Pepsi, in addition to a lot of other things. So we're seeing these very large sponsorships that are tied to specific programming extended onto the second screen. So as I mentioned before, co-viewing apps, so there's really been a very large increase in the number of co-viewing apps that networks have developed. So networks like Bravo, Discovery, HBO, and USA Networks, they've all developed these co-viewing apps that you can download onto your smartphones and onto your tablets. And the reason they're doing this is they're looking to drive loyalty and tune-in and herd and foster consumer behavior that was happening outside of their own websites. And so now they're bringing it in a controlled environment in an app. A great example of a co-viewing app done by a brand is Heineken. So in this case, Heineken provided a co-viewing experience it was called the Star Player app, and soccer fans could download it, and as they were watching the UEFA Championship League matches in Europe, they could actually use the app to play the game in real time as they were watching it on the second screen. So they're really engaging with what's going on the first screen, but it's almost turning it into a game on a hosted brand platform. So Heineken's Star Player app. Next, going back to the own properties, as I mentioned, we're seeing that both brands and networks are aggregating social activity that's happening organically on social networks onto their own properties. So we've seen this with AMC. Over the weekend, WWE had a very, very large event. They launched a new website and aggregated all of the social activity that happened on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook onto their own property, onto their own website. NBC is doing this as well, and then Pepsi, as I mentioned earlier. And what's interesting is that Forrester has taken a look at, what consumers trust. Do they trust radio ads? Do they trust print ads? Do they trust your 30-second spot? And overwhelmingly, consumers trust a brand's website. So this is a very interesting example of aggregating all of this interesting content, social activity on the own property that consumers trust the most. What's really interesting and what shows a lot of promise is also sync advertising. So imagine somebody sitting on their couch, if you will, and they have a second screen device on their lap or in their hand, and they're able to sync the content that's on the second or on the first screen onto their second screen. So, for example, this is the example that I use. Domino's Pizza spot runs on television while you're watching, a basketball game or a football game, let's say. And then when you look down, a button on your tablet or smartphone device says to order now. So a really interesting direct response campaign. And it's really a new way that brands can drive engagement, which is what's able to read what's going on the first screen and sync it with the second screens and apps and what have you. So for instance, the Super Bowl. So the Super Bowl had over 12,230 tweets per second during the game. That's staggering. That's a very that's a huge number. All this data too was given to us by Network Insights. And then for the Grammys, we saw a peak of conversation volume at 10,900 tweets per second. And then the Oscars this year had a spike of 11,780 tweets per second. And so this has been, these live events have really, really been able to generate buzz around social TV and to really engage really large mass-scale audiences. So what does this all mean? Well, the way that we're going to buy media is going to change, and it's going to change soon. And this is because marketers are going to need to be present across multiple screens. So again, across the first screen, on a mobile device, on a tablet, on a PC, so multiple screens. And then spots are no longer going to be sold just for their 30 seconds or their 15 seconds. But, media buyers are going to get really savvy, and so will brands, and make sure that they're buying the right spots that have social reach and second screen opportunities that are a fit for their brand. And advertisers are going to start to need to create strategies for the first and second screen, and we've seen networks doing this very, very quickly, and they're starting to become very, very savvy about it. And I think that we're going to see 30-second spots being replaced with bundled advertising packages. So not just a 30-second spot, but a package that includes targeting viewers across all of these multiple screens and on all of these different social channels. And I think that we're going to see evidence of this in the 2012 upfronts. I can't wait to see what happens. There's been a lot of buzz around it, so we can't wait to see this all come into fruition. What's also interesting is that marketers plan to spend more this year. So the media budgets that are, this year that are compared to 2011, most are staying the same, and then 35% plan to increase. Only 24% plan to decrease. And this is a recent survey that Forrester did with the ANA. And so marketers planning to spend more in 2012. And so with all of this, with the way that, media is going to be sold, and then the fact that, marketers are planning to spend more here in 2012, well, marketers and networks must measure media differently. And so marketers believe that social data shows really great potential for improving. So right now, and we've been just tracking this for social media for this year, but 63% believe the quality and accuracy on the following will improve in the next few years. That's a very high percentage, considering it was the first year that we have been tracking this data. And so they really, really have, high hopes, and they think that social data has a real potential for improving. And TV ads, quite frankly, have room for improvement. So we see here that in the past 2 years, television advertising has become more effective, so 21% up from 7%. And so, we can make television advertising more effective in using these social TV tools and using better measurement and metrics. So social data will actually make our media buys more effective in several different ways. So for one, it's going to introduce new social TV engagement metrics. So as social becomes a part of the TV experience, which it has, new metrics are emerging that tie viewership and online engagement together. And these are enabled by, second-by-second granular TV measurement from these new data sources, which we'll dive more into. And marketers and content providers are going to be able to track buzz and engagement for specific commercials. We're also going to be able to determine, well, what is the social reach for this spot if I run it during this type of programming? Social data will also help us to drive tune-in. So we can actually use metrics to figure out what promotions and strategies are working best to grow our audience. We have actually seen an example of this already around driving tune-in. Earlier this year, CNN's Piers Morgan Tonight saw a 61% spike in viewership mid-program as a direct result of organic social media conversations. So really interesting number there. Next, it will be a really interesting and new way to define audience segments. And so what we can do is we can use granular measurement, and overlay these things with live tune-in information to uncover new insights in audience segments. And these data sources will help marketers really fine-tune their TV marketing campaigns as well as their marketing mix models, for instance. We've also seen increasingly that networks and brands are optimizing TV content and their advertising using social media as a feedback engine. So looking very closely at sentiment, the types of comments, the amount of tweets, and the chatter that's going in and around all of your efforts, and being able to fine-tune them and tweak them based on the feedback engine that you're getting. So these are some really new and interesting ways that social data will make our media buys much more effective as we move forward into this new era of watching television and social TV. So with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to Paul. Paul's going to show us exactly how we can do this and share some really exciting case studies for all of you. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. I'm going to show my screen now. Can you see that? Okay, great. Some great examples of what brands and networks are doing to use social to harness the power of social and to create tune-in, to create a lot of things. I think that one example that you mentioned around Piers Morgan was driven by a single tweet about Jane Fonda, who was appearing on his show, and I thought the case study behind that was fantastic. So my job is to help drive it home a little bit here. So I'm going to take you through the how part on how to harness this data. I think Elizabeth has presented some really compelling evidence. And then the result part. So what happens when you do drive social throughout your organization to help you make better, smarter media decisions? So before I dive in, I'd like to say there are a few things that we've learned at Networked Insights over the last 5 years as we've been on a journey to help brands and networks harness the power of social data. And I'd say probably the first and most important thing that we learned is you can't just take a social media monitoring tool or things to solve and react to. It may be excellent for things like, I don't know, customer support issues. It's already happened, right? It's a monitoring tool. Instead, you have to take social data and integrate it practically and purposefully into the marketing ecosystem. And I want to show you kind of how we've done that. We started our journey to harness the power of social use, et cetera, and we added to it the latest shiny object, if you will, as we went along, and things today that would include things like, Google Plus and Pinterest and, YouTube channels and things like this. So, if you're going to do this, you're going to collective sources. We estimate we capture roughly 800 million unique, got the most comprehensive library of social data dating back 2.5 years, right? Every conversation, every comment, every tweet. By the way, this is not an insignificant task, right? I have great respect for our tech group, who manages, over a petabyte of data. And a recent stat that I saw said that a petabyte is 100 times the size of the Library of Congress, right? So, not an insignificant fact. And also, what today people commonly are calling big data, right? So it gives us the power to model what's happened in the past and, even predict what can happen in the future. If we take that data, we carve it up. We can, or it could be as complex of moms or an audience unique to us that would be like value shoppers or liquor drinkers or fashionistas, right? We have some very clever and cute names for some audiences that we've hand curated, which a marketer, may be trying to break into. But yet, better yet, we can define them by interest, like, movie buffs, or attitudes, like intent to purchase a, cellular device or something like that, specific use. The broadest audience, for a country, however the particular marketer would want to use it. And this is useful for discovery, right? Discovery of trends, discovery of themes, as well as any holistic measurements of things like reach. So we can say, how did this play, across this general audience? The narrowest, more specific, or most specific, precise type of audience is for individuals specifically exhibiting behavior. Another way that we can look at things is through a site-based audience. And this is, again, a hand-selected or hand-curated, if you will, set of sites that we work with our clients to represent a certain kind of interest, or working on their behalf of a certain vertical. This could be something like a car enthusiast, for example. We find all the car sites, or sports enthusiasts will find all the sports sites. Particularly useful for watching trends of a given audience. And then in a similar fashion, we have what we call a category-based audience. And this is really around a product category, or maybe a competitive. We get a lot of things like we add into it Facebook fan pages and YouTube channels. This is where some of that would come into play and make it a really, really rich data set. So let's put that into perspective with some common use cases that we see with clients today. And typically, most of our engagements start with something that we call audience sync. Right? You got to know your audience, and we'll work with the client to understand their target segments and validate that their understanding of those things in social data. And we'll also use our solutions to find, unknown audiences, and that maybe they didn't know existed for their product or their service. And together we'll take this known and unknown audiences and help see how aligned they are with those audiences and their media plans, or any of the content they're building, if you will. So 6 months ago, just a quick illumination fact on an audience sync. 6 months ago, audience around young women. And you might think they really enjoyed the lemon lime flavor, and they thought it was healthier than some of the other, cola flavored beverages, and it was packed with caffeine, right? They actually to stay awake to help take care of their children, right? And I can guarantee you, not one young mother would tell you that in a focus group, right, or some sort of survey. But they did tell it to each other in anonymity, or telling them about why they use it. And this is really interesting, and I think it exemplifies the beauty of this kind of data, because it can really help you uncover a new audience that you could target, and hence their media needed to change if they wanted to really harness the power of targeting the mother segment or mom's segment. So typically the next place we go would be what we call a content sink, and we take those audiences that we now know and we understand, particularly useful, let's say, in messaging for campaign development or keyword selection, really informative for programming on the network side. And speaking of networks, some of them, the data was that women tend to inform messaging in a particular campaign. In a similar fashion, we have what we call media sync, is where we drill into audiences to find out what are the exact media properties that resonate with this audience. So now that we've got this pile of data on your audience and what they're talking about and what they're interested in, where exactly are they saying it? It's literally a set of TV programs or websites or search keywords that help our clients understand, for each of those audiences, what's the best way to reach them. Around customers, for Samsung customers that were segmented into how they consume certain media, right? Looking at where they might do that, where that use of that in getting them to engage with their product and go forward from there. So putting it all together, it's sort of the who of the audience, the what of the content, and the where of the media. Essentially what our clients are doing is building a campaign around these three and buying. In my prior job, be the way your life is trending currently, we get a brand health report every 6 months. How am I doing from an aided and unaided awareness perspective? We get a TV buy report every 3 months. How did our media perform on TV? Did the message resonate? Do we need to change it? We get a digital buy report every month. How did our digital media perform? What was good, what was bad? We used to run what I call a shoot the loser program, take the stuff that didn't work, get rid of that and take the money and double it down on the winners. We do a search campaign every week. I could look at search data every week. You can look at website data every day, but it's impossible to draw a conclusion across all of that. I mean, I remember saying, what we're doing is we're optimizing by report. The next thing that comes center of your decision making, truly allows you to do that in real saying which particular TV, digital, or search property you want to spend, and then measurement, where we do a fabulous job of correlating, social metrics, optimize in real time, not next time, right? Which is typically the way marketers approach things. Oh, next time we should do it differently. Well, doing it in real time doesn't leave that to chance. And sometimes there's just not that institutional learning within an organization that can, help make sure that that insight survives long enough to make it to next time, right? So real time is clearly the way to go. I want to show you 8 different, and they can be across a number of different ways. I'm going to give you 4 specific case studies, but I wanted to make sure I covered these 8 areas in terms that my audience uses. What key messages should we look at, if we want to inform creative development? In product, what features do they want the most, or maybe what product should I even develop that hasn't been developed yet? And then measuring, how did it work? What kind of engagement did we get? And ultimately, did we move the needle? Did sales go up or what? So I'm going to show you 4 examples where we had some significant impact for clients. And the first one is around campaign development. This is a TV show, again, that I mentioned a little, a big success for them, and clearly a big, their target segments were actually splitting into 2 different segments, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, so that they would need 2 different types of messaging. And we found this 3 days before the launch, and they were able, talk about agile marketing or adaptive marketing, right? They were able to adjust on the fly and, get that message out. And it had a significant impact for them. We also found that the audience was looking for a certain character. We started to see a certain character being used to inform the programming of a show. In my mind, it's sort of the first time I've heard of this in a scripted series. We clearly have heard of that in reality TV. And then we started to use real-time data to try and figure out the optimal way to think up significantly. It actually went up to 2.1 million users, and of course they got retained for a second season. So things worked out really well for them, and is to maximize the reach of a TV buy, right? And there's nothing is more expensive than buying, let's say, a Super Bowl ad or buying the NFL, and not everybody can afford that, quite frankly. And I'm sure many marketers could sympathize with that. In this days, of course, it's really expensive. But so the question came, how can I take advantage of a hardcore audience like an NFL, but without paying premium prices? Well, I am buying TV, but I can't afford that. I don't want to live like buying into the audience of a football, or Super Bowl, type audience. It's kind of what I think of as almost like the movie Moneyball, right, where the Oakland A's versus the Yankees. Like, how do you do that in marketing? How do you outsmart them from a media perspective using social data? So what we did with one of our clients, and they were able to get 17% more inventory by changing around their inventory to find the most highly engaged audiences that also liked football, and 20% more reach from the same price of media, right? So those that that resonate for your particular brand, that you'll get the very timely, regarding this last, to track the NCAA audience. Now, by the way, this audience was a size of 22 to, where were the spikes in activity that we could take advantage of? And what we thought would be the action, upsets, right? People loved upsets, right? A highly engaged audience looking at the upsets. So our recommendation was to own the upsets from the previous year and from the current year. And we projected that they would get about 1 billion. It was 966 million impressions, almost 1 billion, during the tournament, which was equivalent to what the competitive brand was spending on TV. But they were spending $42 million as opposed to our client, which was spending $2 million, right? So significantly less cost. And I would argue a more highly engaged audience at that. Sticking with the sports metaphor here, if you're going to buy a Super Bowl ad, you're going to want to make sure that it resonates with people. So realizing in user-generated content, you really need to know what is going to resonate with your audience, especially if you're going to spend on something like a Super Bowl ad. So what we did is we helped them design the ad campaign and inform the creative by looking at what would resonate with their brand, in an event situation like this. What artist, what song, what celebrity, how should they show the product, how can they capitalize on social, what kind of length, and what did drive for them a result of, achieving more product activations than they had planned on, 33% more activations than they had planned on. So a great business result there as well. So where do we go from here? Where we go from here is, keeping you in sync with your to find and create engagement across different screens. We've been helping our clients use our analytics to inform and measure $5 billion worth of media spend, and we're not going to stop there. And don't take my word for it. As the CMO, no presentation from you would be complete without their topmost innovative company list, number 39 overall, but number 3 overall in advertising, with heavyweights like an Apple and a Google in there. And clearly this is a huge win for us. And sorry for the overt commercial here, but as a marketer, this is a key milestone for any given brand. And
dialog box on the right side of that go-to webinar.
Yep.
And then Paul's got his on the slide right there at Paul Dunay. Okay, here's the question for us. Elizabeth, maybe you can take a shot at this one. Who are the leaders in social TV, both brands and networks today?
It's funny that question is being asked. It's the exact question that both Paul and I heard at the Social TV Summit that was here in San Francisco this week. There was a really kind of usual suspects that were listed every time that this question came up. So brands that are doing this really well, I have to say Pepsi is definitely a standout brand that's really embraced this. The person, a really great partner with USA Networks, which I'll name as one of the kind of more forward-thinking and progressive in the space as far as, and so I'd say, yeah, definitely USA, Bravo, and then Pepsi and Lincoln, and then also a Chevrolet as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
In the show, so I'm,
I am too.
on that. Touch from their perspective, I love what they're doing with this cell phone that runs throughout the TV show, and then they're going to be, not only using that cell world too, that pictures are being taken, and those pictures are going to end up on the show. And we heard from the folks who were running that particular campaign that they're also doing like a Facebook thing, so your Facebook pictures could end up on the show too as well. So I love how they're getting engagement. It's still kind of early days. I mean, it's the classic iceberg statement, right? We don't really know where this is going, but a lot of people are trying a lot of really cool things, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm finding it more engaging, and I'm using the social apps too. I'm using the GetGlues, the Misos, the Viggles out there to understand. Yeah, so I think we see it two different ways, right? If I was to take a step back and look at where we see successful clients using it, and maybe comparing and contrasting that to the way where folks don't necessarily use it at all, right, or just beginning to. And one of the things that I've noticed is that there's a more traditional approach, right, where people are sort of just what they see happening socially in order to maximize the impact of their media. And I think that's really neat, and we see that because they see this data being of high value. Not that they've chucked everything out, but they're basing their main recommendations on seeing that media through social eyeballs first.
Great. Elizabeth, we have a question about the social reach. And exactly what is it, and maybe what are the implications of it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. So what we mean by, or what I mean by social reach rather, is that all of my friends that are seeing this. So it's not just that one person. It's what is what is the social reach of this? So if this is being shown, what have you. So that's kind of what we mean by that.
And social reach for us, we can use that to sort of social reach, or we actually call that social lift in some cases, that you got by choosing this kind of program.
Yep.
We're quickly approaching the top of the hour. I've got one last question, and then we're going to let everybody go here. And this one is maybe a higher level one that both you guys can take. The audience is asking, what type of marketing decisions outside of media planning can social data inform?
BG client that comes to us, every now and again to understand, hey, I'm thinking of developing a product for working moms or something like this, or working with women. How do I know what's going to resonate? So as they're beginning the stage gate, process around a new product, they're looking at social. Then they're advancing that idea and continuing to check into it as the hit, and that's going to be relevant when it gets out the other side. I think that is one of the more unique uses that I'm extremely excited about seeing.
Yeah, and I would say even just to complement that with product launches. Really understand, iterate on the product so it resonates with the audience, further.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for your time and for the conversation today. Again, the slides and the presentation, the recording of the